Hi guys, I've got a 1 month 1 palette video today. This is going to be a recap of the palette that I've been focusing on the past month, and then I will introduce the next palette that I want to focus on for the month of October and into November. It's the palette I've got on my eyes today, so at the end of this video I will include some snippets as to how I made this makeup look and what the palette is. Before I get into the actual video, I just want to say if you're new here and you haven't subscribed, please think about subscribing. It would be lovely to have you here. Thank you to those that already have, it really does mean a lot. Thank you so much for sticking around. And I'm just going to get straight into the video before I get too soppy. Okay, so the palette I've been working on then is my Revolution Soph Extra Spice palette. It is really reflective. I'm trying not to blind you. Now I own her original palette and obviously the Extra Spice palette. Out of the two, my favourite is the original palette. I just prefer the colour story. I think the shades are much more up my street. It's not as intimidating, I think. And I just open that palette and I know what to do with it. I know exactly the type of look I want to create. But with this palette, in my opinion, this is a bit bolder. It's a bit darker. And I look at it and I go, not really sure what I want to do, not really sure what shades are going to work well together, and it just stumps me a little bit. I'm not really too sure the eyeshadow look I want to create when I use this palette. So that's why I focused on it the past month, to really get my use out of it and to see actually what kind of looks can I create with this palette. So in total this month I made 16 looks with this palette. Some of them were a bit more extravagant, a bit more colourful and vibrant than others. I think one of the days, I've got a notes thing on my phone, one of the days I just used one colour as a one shadow and done. Other days I used like 7 shades. So a real variation in uses of this palette and looks that I've created. And I feel like this palette is pretty good for creating a whole variety of different looks. You have your bright shades up here, your yellow, orange and reds. You've got a shimmery silver as well, which isn't a very common shade I don't feel in palettes. And then you've got like some browns here as well, so you can go for a more brown, like everyday kind of look, or you can go bold and vibrant. However, because these shades are bold, they're bright, they are a bit darker than her original palette, I did find this past month that the eyeshadow looks I created were very dark, were very bold, and it felt like I was wearing a lot of colour on my eyes. Now I'll be honest, I'm not hugely impressed with this palette. I think the quality is very hit and miss. There are some shadows that perform a lot better than others, so I feel like consistency is kind of lacking across the shades in this palette here. So some of them are quite difficult to work with, to blend, were a bit patchy. Others were much better. So for example then, if I talk you through some of the matte shades, so the burgundies here, so this one is Enchanted, this one is Mulled Wine. The colours themselves looked really, really nice, very autumnal, very vampy for this kind of year, but they applied quite patchy and they were quite difficult to blend as well. Now that is quite common for those types of shades. Burgundies, purples, they are a little bit difficult to work with, and this palette was no exception. Unfortunately, they were patchy and they were difficult to blend, as was as well I think this red one here, which is called 21. But some of the other shades like Vitamin C and Cookie Dough here, those were a lot easier to work with. Those blended out really quite nicely. And Cookie Dough here, this sort of mid-toned warm brown, was the shade I actually wore the most. I wore it 7 times over the past month. This is a really nice transition shade, a really nice crease shade for me. And I think on one of the days, I'm checking the notes section on my phone by the way. On one of the days I wore it just as a lid shade, and then other days I used it as a transition with like some of the other browns and also some other shades in this palette as well. Reputation up here, I found this quite dark as an actual eyeshadow shade in itself, but that was a really nice eyeliner shade, so I did use this as a bit of a soft definition eyeliner type of look. And with the shimmers really do vary. The best shimmers in this palette are Infinity. This is a beautiful shade, so pigmented, a real pop of vibrant silver colour. Dreams down here in the corner, this gold shimmery shade, this one was also really nice. But then when I used Aurora, this green shimmery one up here, the quality is so different. This one isn't really that pigmented at all. It's really difficult to work with, and I feel like you really need a glitter primer underneath to make it pop. If all of the shimmers in this palette were of the same quality as Infinity, the silver one down here, this palette, in my opinion, would be a lot better. So that's what I kind of mean when I feel like the consistency in this palette is really kind of hit and miss. You've got some shimmers that perform a lot better than others, they're more pigmented, and then with some of the mattes, some of them apply and blend out a lot better than others, and others are a bit patchy. So a real hit and miss in terms of quality in this palette. However, the good thing with this palette is that you can create so many different looks. So I feel like this palette would be a good palette for people who are just sort of starting to get into makeup and want to play about, want to experiment with lots of different colours and also your technique as well. But I think for people who are sort of looking for a real high performing palette, then I do feel like you can get better than this one. But you know, it is £10, so sometimes it is a case of, well, you do have to pay a little bit better to get a better quality palette. But then saying that, her original palette, in my opinion, much better than this one. I really do love that palette. So although you can create loads of different looks with this palette here, I found that the looks I created were either really colourful or really bold and dark. Now that might just be me, that might just be, you know, how I ended up using this palette. If you've got this palette at home, you might actually disagree and think, well no, I've managed to create some really light coloured looks. But that just tended to be the kind of looks that I have created recently. They do tend to be quite kind of bold and in your face. And I'm starting to move away from that. As I'm getting older, I don't want to be going for real dark, bold, bright eyeshadow looks. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes in the summer I will whack out my really colourful, bright palette, also from Revolution, and I will go for a bold, vibrant, colourful eyeshadow look. But on a day-to-day basis, these aren't really the kind of colours that I really want to be going for. I want to keep things fairly kind of muted, fairly pared back, and I'm focusing more on enhancing my natural features. But like I say, I do think this palette is really good for those getting into makeup that want to play with a variety of different colours, want a good mix of matte colours and shimmer colours as well. And also you can go for like a everyday brown look, and you can go for a bold, bright, vibrant, summery look as well. So this palette does tick a lot of boxes, but for me, the quality is really hit and miss. I much prefer her original palette, and I can actually dupe a lot of these colours as well. I can dupe a lot of these colours from my Naked Heat palette, from my Soph original palette, my We Are Love Revolution palette as well. So I am actually going to declutter this palette. I know that if I put this back in my collection, I'm not going to use it, and I haven't used it that often since I've bought it. And I think it is just because I find the quality real kind of hit and miss, like I keep saying, and the fact as well that it is dark, and I am a little bit intimidated by this palette. I open it and go, oh, I don't know what to do. So it doesn't really kind of tick all of my boxes. So I am going to be decluttering this palette. But it has been fun to use it actually. It has been fun to get it out, get it used, work through all of the colours and see what kind of looks I can come up with. So I have enjoyed the range of colours, range of looks that I've been able to make the past month. So it has been a good month. Now I did set a target for using each of the shades in this palette, and I did say I want to use each shade at least 3 times, and I have managed that, so that is very good. Some of the shades I have used more than others, so like I say, Cookie Dough, this brown one here, I used 7 times, and then 6 times I used Everyday, this shimmery one here. That was a good inner corner highlight shade and a brow bone shade, so that was quite an easy one to keep dipping in and out of. And then 5 times I used Reputation here, this dark navy. That was a really nice eyeliner type of shade. And then 4 times was Mulled Wine here, this burgundy one. This one surprised me though, because this was quite a patchy, difficult one to work with, so it surprised me that I used it 5 times. Sorry, 4 times. And then yes, all the others I used 3 times. Okay, so I'm going to pop in some pictures of all the looks that I've created along with the palette itself so I can show you the shades I use for each look.
I pray for my home
Okay, so the next palette I'm going to be working on is my Urban Decay Naked Heat palette. This palette is just full of autumnal shades. It's a real warm tone palette and you've got a lovely kind of selection of coppers, oranges, burgundy shades, and then like a dark purple here and a shimmery purpley kind of colour here as well. Now this palette I love to use in the autumn, and in particular October. To me, October is an orange month. So I like to try and wear orangey type makeup during the month of October. Now I've had this palette for a good couple of years. It doesn't really look like I've touched it, but the quality of this palette is really good. The shades are super pigmented, so you only really need to dip your brush in sort of once, twice, and you've got enough pigment for your eyes. So these aren't shades, well I don't think, these aren't shades that you're going to get through super quickly and hit pan in really quickly as well. A lot of fallout though, when I did create this eyeshadow look, I forgot just how much fallout you do get with this palette. So if you are going to be going for like darker shades up here, it might be a good idea to do your eyes first and then do your base. Something that I have found with this palette is that regardless of the shades that I choose, I find that the looks all end up looking incredibly similar. Now it might just be because this is kind of variations of one colour story, so yes, you aren't going to be getting loads of different variations of looks, but they do look really, really similar. Now I have heard that the trick with this palette, and possibly with other naked palettes as well, is to just stick to round about sort of 3 shades. The more shades you include in your look, the more murky it's going to look, the more they're all just going to blend into one, and that's when all of your eyeshadow looks that you're trying to create from this palette end up looking pretty similar. So I'm going to bear that in mind when I do some looks. I think I used about sort of 6 or so in this look today, but I really do like this palette, and this is going to pair really nicely with my NARS duo in Isolde. Oh, those 2 colours are going to look so nice with this palette here. Now I'm going to have a different usage goal for this palette. Because there are 12 shades in this palette, I'm going to set a usage goal for 5 for each of the shades. I'm not going to double it from 3 to 6. I am going to stick with 5 and see how I get on with that. And as usual, I will try my best to take as many pictures as I can of all of my eyeshadow looks to show you in the next video. But for now, I'm just going to say thank you so much for watching the video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. And I'm going to insert the footage of how I made this makeup look that I have on today. But thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye.